Thank you so much. You all can have a seat for just a second here. A good Sunday to everybody. We're so grateful that you are here. My name is Gina Maravilla. I'm from Channel 3's Good Morning Arizona, and I also happen to be a very proud member of the City of Scottsdale's public safety family. So it truly is my honor and privilege to be your MC tonight for this very important remembrance. May we never forget that incredibly fateful day in our country's history. It's hard to believe that it has been 15 years since September 11th, 2001. But again, today, we pledge that we will never forget. Again, I thank you for being here so much. Your presence here means so much to just the first responders and those who were so deeply touched by that day, though as Americans, we all were. And I am once again going to ask you to rise for the posting of the colors by the combined Scottsdale Police and Fire Department Public Safety Honor Guard, joined by the Glendale Pipes and Drums.
Face. Present arms.
Please join me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Detail. Face. Ready. March. Ready, march.
You may be seated. Yes, definitely applaud for our honor guards. If you would please help me for our public safety invocation, welcome to the podium Fire Chaplain Pastor Mark Ewell and Police Chaplain Rabbi Ariel Shoshan.
Would you join us as we pray? Father, we are thankful for the chance to be able to come together and remember 9/11. We do so not simply to look back in honor of those who gave their lives, but Lord, we also continue to look forward. We ask that you give us your strength of your presence, and Father, for that to put away our fears. Lord, you are the God of all comfort, and so we ask for that comfort and for you to provide a peace that only you can supply. Father, help us to trust your total sovereignty, for your dominion is everlasting. We would ask you for your protection and would humbly ask for your continued hand of safety be upon our land. For you alone are our strength and our shield. And for such a complicated issue as this, we ask for your wisdom for our leaders. Help us as a country to move forward in the strength of unity. And now, in honor of Father Michael Judge, the chaplain for the New York Fire Department and the first official casualty of 9/11, I would like to use his words from a prayer that he shared the day before to Bronx Ladder 42. Thank you, Lord, for life. Thank you for love. Thank you for goodness and for work. Thank you for family. Thank you for friends. Thank you for every gift, because we know that every gift comes from you, and without you, we have and are nothing. So as we celebrate this day in thanksgiving to you, keep our hearts and our minds open. Let us enjoy each other's company, and most of all, let us be conscious of your presence in our lives, and in a special way in the lives of all those who have gone before us. Amen.
You, Almighty God, remember the deeds done throughout history, and you recall all of the creatures fashioned since earliest times. You remember everything ever done, and not a single creature is hidden from you, who keeps watch and sees to the very end of all generations. Remember with honor all those who perished in the unforgettable events of September 11th, 2001. Recall the dedication, commitment, and life-saving sacrifices of the 343 men and women of the New York City Fire Department and the 71 law enforcement officers of the New York City Police Department, the Port Authority, and 8 other agencies in New York, Virginia, and the nation's capital. May their memories and the memories of the 55 military personnel lost that day forever be a blessing. United through the pain of loss and voids created for nearly 3,000 families and countless friends, we banded together as a nation of brothers and sisters. Our common passion for the gift of liberty and our compassion for the families suffering inspired us to see in ourselves greater similarities than differences. We committed to one another, and we carried each other through. Creator of all mankind, we beseech you to give us the strength and character to honor our humanity. We ask that you inspire us in good times to stand together as one nation, indivisible, extending a helping hand to one another beyond any perceived divide. The greatest tribute we can pay to the memory of those who were lost, and especially those who ran into harm's way in order to save others, is to kindle in our hearts a fire of love for each other and to ignite our souls to the enduring success of all for which this great nation stands. Keep aglow within us, God, a spirit of gratitude for your many blessings, and help us to continue to reap the honor of harvest as citizens of this magnificent country, great state, and spectacular city. Amen.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. You know, Pastor Yule prayed for our leaders, and Rabbi Shoshan prayed for courage and unity, which is why it's so important on a day like today, at a ceremony like this, that our leaders are here. And I'm so happy and proud to say that our city leaders are here to say that we do learn from the lessons of 9/11 and that they lead our communities with those lessons in mind. And I'd like to recognize some of our dignitaries who are here. Scottsdale Mayor Jim Lane. Mayor, thank you for being here. We say thank you so much. Vice Mayor Kathy Littlefield. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Council Member Virginia Cordy. Thank you, ma'am, for showing your support. Council Member Suzanne Clapp. Thank you, ma'am. We tip our hats to you. Council Member Guy Phillips. Sir, thank you for your support today. And Councilman Member David Smith. Sir, thank you to you as well. And Godspeed to all of you as you lead our community with the lessons of 9/11 in mind. Please help me welcome to the podium, as we are talking about our leaders, our mayor for the city of Scottsdale, Jim Lane. Mayor.
Thank you all for joining us this evening in memory of one of the most impactful days in the history of our nation. Throughout this day, we have paid tribute to the victims of the Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, by hearing the names and seeing the faces of the victims at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon, and from the hijacked United Airlines Flight 93 that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The exhibits in the lobby help us to remember 15 years ago is a long time, but for many of us, it doesn't feel so far away. The piece of steel from the World Trade Center on display here is twisted and scarred, yet improbably still strong. Seeing it, touching it, and feeling it transports us all back in time a bit. Over the next hour, we will continue that journey together. We'll return to that tragic day by sharing memories with people who were there in the minutes, the hours, the days, and weeks after the first plane hit. This is a very important journey. For most Americans, the shock and pain of that day has faded, but we must not let it fade away completely. Remembering can be difficult, but remembering should also rekindle our resolve to never let this great nation and its great people be cowed by terrorism. The towers may have fallen, but America stands tall. I'd like to begin by telling a little bit of a story about my memories of 9/11. Long ago, long before that fateful day, I was a proud resident of the state of New Jersey. And I remember when the World Trade Center was being built, and I watched with amazement from across the Hudson River. When the World Trade Center was built, watching with amazement in the early 70s as to what then were the world's tallest buildings reaching to the sky. I moved to Scottsdale shortly after the Twin Towers opened in '73. And 20 years later, I remember the 1993 truck bomb that attempted to bring the towers down. It was nearly successful. While that attack failed its ultimate goal, it killed 6 people and was an early indication of a new kind of warfare with which we unfortunately have become too familiar. Now, in August of 2001, just weeks before the attack, I was in New York City with my daughter Nancy, and we were visiting the tower. Of course, it was one of the most recognizable landmarks in New York City, and it was a must-see. But then, back in Scottsdale on September 11th, 2001, I remember turning on the TV while getting ready for work and helping get the kids ready for school, and seeing the first tower in flames. Like many of us around the nation, I watched with confusion and concern, wondering how such a terrible accident could occur. But I did remember that one foggy day in the mid-'50s, when a B-26 bomber accidentally hit the Empire State Building, that it was plausible that this was an accident, even though it was a very clear day, and of course many years later with technology and an ability to even navigate. But then I remember watching live as the second plane hit in the second tower. Any of you that were watching at that moment in time had to have sort of a stunned effect, first of disbelief, and the realization that we were no longer bearing witness to a tragic accident, but to something entirely different. I remember calling my kids into the room and telling them, what you're watching here is something that will change our lives forever. And of course, millions of lives changed instantly on that fateful morning, which was one of the ways that the 9/11 attacks mirrored the event to which it's most often compared. The undeclared act of war by the Japanese on December 7th, 1941 on Pearl Harbor, 60 years prior. That attack was a piece of distant history for most of us. Unfortunately, it now had a present-day equivalent. Of course, that was armed forces versus armed forces, and this was militants versus innocent non-combatants. Over the next couple of days, I was in contact with my sisters living in New Jersey. 3 of my 5 sisters still live in New Jersey, checking on their well-being and seeing how they and their friends and family had maybe been affected, hopefully not adversely. But one story I remember distinctly hearing from them was of the abandoned cars at train stations in New Jersey. Many people in New Jersey do commute and who work in the towers in New York City. They drive to a train station and then take the train into the city. Of course, that first evening and even for days afterward, the cars now sat in those stations because their owners would never return. Another memory I have is one that I'm sure many of you share, and that's the feeling of unity that surges across the country. We dealt with the tragedy as one nation with one recognized enemy. The East Coast met the West Coast, and the North met the South. If one of us was under attack, we were all under attack. In the years since, however, we've lost some of that sense of togetherness, returning focus to things that divide us rather than the values and beliefs we all share. One of the most important purposes, if there is a purpose in this, of remembrance like this is to rekindle that national unity. The attacks of September 11th were and remain a painful reminder that there are people on this planet who continue to stand against our country, our people, our beliefs, and our way of life. There are people who have and will act upon that hatred. But let's take this day to remember that there are many more who will stand up to that hatred with courage, bravery, with care, and kindness. There were many probably unknown, but certainly many individual acts of courage, specifically like the men of the United Airline Flight 93. In their attempt to regain control of their hijacked aircraft, they were able to thwart the ultimate mission of the terrorists in the target of the White House, or so it is fairly well understood. But that day shined a light on some of the everyday heroes of this country, almost by job description, on first responders like the firefighters and police officers who ran into those burning buildings to help people get out. They are the finest example of what some call the foot soldiers of democracy. When they went to work this morning, they could never have expected to be on the front lines of a new and terrible warfare. That was their fate, however, and their countless acts of heroism deserves tribute far beyond what we can do here this evening. But we'll try. As we move to our panel discussions to share memories and stories of those men and women and what they did, we must never forget their sacrifices. The greatest honor we can bestow upon their memory is to remain committed as Americans to their proud efforts, work, lives, and by staying united as Americans. A nationwide campaign to that end called 9/11 Tomorrow Together officially launched today. This network of people and organizations is committed to this national unity and to making 9/11 a national day of service to honor those we lost. Part of the campaign asks, how will you remember 9/11? The question is really asking, how will you turn the memory of a terrible day into something other than sadness and anger? I think one thing that we probably should all commit to is displaying our flag every year on this day as a sign of unity and of America. We continue this journey of remembrance think about that question and how you would answer it. For me, in addition to making sure I display our American flag, I will remain a proud American who is proud of my fellow Americans in their differences and in what we hold common together, and staying united and being Americans together. This is an important day in America's life. A lot of things have changed, just as I told my children they would. But we may have to make sure that what changes we make in response to this type of action are solid and good for America and for all of us together. I want to thank you, and I want to also just say God bless Scottsdale, and God bless America, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
And can't wait to share with you some of the stories from our panel members. We're going to get to that in just a bit. But just as the mayor alluded to, these are stories of real-life heroes that will really, really touch your heart, and I think more than anything, really inspire you. All right, our next guest, if you will help me welcome somebody who's very near and dear to my heart, being that I am a longtime member of the Scottsdale Police family. Please help me welcome Police Chief Alan Rodbell.
Good evening. We live in a wonderful country. We live in a country where we're surrounded by heroes and heroism every single day of our lives. People of great character walk beside us at our home, at work, and in our streets. For the most part, we're oblivious to them, but they are prepared to serve, for that's the only ambition they have, to serve. Whether they wear medical white, surgical green, fire rescue blue, or the many uniform colors of law enforcement agencies and the military, or for that matter, whether they wear pinstripe suits or dresses. Whether they work in an office or a boardroom, a classroom, or on our streets, in patrol cars, engine houses, or in our medical centers, or on foreign battlefields or camps. We are surrounded by heroes in a country that dreams of a world where there should never be any need for heroics, if only people did the right thing. On September 11th, 2001, at approximately 7 o'clock in the morning, my wife Debbie and I walked into the San Francisco airport to fly home to Washington, D.C. We witnessed security change before our very eyes and saw the status boards go from on time to delayed to canceled. We listened to supposition and rumor filled the terminal, and we began our search for answers. We located a sports bar inside the airport with a television and watched the second plane full of neighbors and friends be used as a missile against us as it wrecked into the South Tower. And rumor turned to reality and fear. We rented a car, and in the 52-hour ride home across the continental United States, we witnessed planeless skies, shared emotion and shock with strangers, and listened intently to the radio. There was a vision that haunted me during that ride and still haunts me from time to time, even today. It's a vision of fire rescue workers and law enforcement personnel ascending the narrow stairwell in an attempt to save property and protect lives. All the while, tower employees were making their way down to escape to safety. Figures silently passing in the dark, exchanging glances, exchanging fear for hope. And I'm reminded, heroes are those who dedicate themselves to service. I'd like to take a moment to thank all those who serve at all levels in our society, for it is they who remind us that we live in a wonderful country where the words free and brave are not merely words in a song, but declarations in our anthem. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Well, from a police family standpoint, no doubt our brothers and sisters on the fire side of the house are just that. They are family. And my husband has had the privilege of working with Fire Chief Tom Shannon. So are we still family, even though I'm on the police side of the house? Okay, good. Please help me welcome to the podium Fire Chief Tom Shannon.
Well, I will keep my comments brief because we have such an amazing panel. I will surely forget, if I don't do it now, to thank the many staff that had so much to do with putting together an amazing museum outside. Certainly Lori Schmidt from my office, Linda Anareno, Autumn Hodge, Martin from Building Facilities, Chris Vassal from PD. What you see out there really oozes a thought and honor. And I thought I would also just take 1 minute to point out that we are truly honored today, not only by Lieutenant Hennessy, but many of the Arizona retirees of the FDNY. Gentlemen, would you please stand just briefly so we can recognize you? Thank you. Thank you. So the American Fire Service has deep, deep roots. In fact, fire service goes way back. Off the mayor's comments, you described us as foot soldiers, those first responders, and I think that's quite accurate. In the early days, they were called vigiles. As the soldiers would go off into battle to conquer new territories or protect their own, they left behind a century of citizen protectors, and it's strange how history will repeat itself, and they found themselves as all-hazard protectors. It didn't matter if it was a fire or if it was a flood. If citizens or neighbors were in need, those vigiles were there. That is the foundation and the root of the American Fire Service. Public safety I view as two sides of a coin, and law enforcement and fire share that space. What we know for sure is that each one of the members of not only the American Fire Service and law enforcement, but certainly those folks here in Scottsdale come to work every day with full knowledge that it is their job and it is their solemn oath to put themselves in harm's way for the citizens. And so they are truly modern day vigiles. When I think of the 343, and gentlemen, I'm quite sure you can attest to this, it's such a representation of America. They're all descendants, virtually either by generation or in one time removed, of all over the world cultures, Europe, the Middle East. Each culture is represented in that group, and it seems fitting that the unity flag and the props that are out there all speak towards unifying a country. And I do remember this. There are so many things about 9/11 that each one of us is burned into our minds, but I do remember this. We all felt together for a long, long time. And I think that that's one thing that we should always grab onto and hold on to. I can tell you that the Scottsdale Fire Department and the Scottsdale Police Department, we circle up and we take care of each other so that we can best take care of you. And so it is certainly my honor to be any part of this. I'm so proud of the organization. I'm so proud of this city, and I cannot wait to hear from our honored guests. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief. You know, with 9/11, emergency preparedness really came to the forefront. We saw the development of the Homeland Security Department, and communities, counties, states throughout the country form very strong emergency management departments. And it's wonderful to say that here in the Phoenix area, I know that the emergency management departments have come together and worked together phenomenally to pull off amazing events like Super Bowls, All-Star games, and that little golf tournament that we see in North Scottsdale every year. And everybody has a great time, and you don't hear about big problems, and it's because of the hard work and dedication of those who are in the emergency preparedness departments. So please help me welcome to the podium here tonight Scottsdale's Emergency Manager, Brent Olson.
that light is bright. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here today for this 15th year remembrance of one of the most tragic events in our nation's history. It's hard to believe it's been 15 years. I've heard several of the speakers say that. Like most of us here, I can remember that day like it was yesterday. The indelible images of the planes crashing into the towers, scores of people fleeing, and those seemingly indestructible towers crashing down. Added to that were pictures of the fires at the Pentagon and the reports about Flight 93 and the heroic efforts of the people on board that plane. As terrible as I felt that day, as the continuous news reports made us feel the extent of the damage and the loss of life, as a first responder myself, I also felt a sense of pride as I watched first responders running headlong into those buildings, trying desperately to do what they always do: run into a place everyone is running away from to save lives and protect lives, to make a difference. Unfortunately, hundreds of our brothers and sisters in law enforcement and the fire service did not come back out. From tragedy comes strength. From adversity comes evaluation of the way things are and how to make them better. 9/11 reinforced the need to be better prepared as a nation and come together in a united way for the safety and security of our communities. Post 9/11, we learned that the community as a whole has to be ready for any event, any hazard. Whether it's a hurricane like Katrina, a superstorm like Sandy, tornadoes leveling cities like Joplin, Missouri and Norman, Oklahoma, or floods leaving places like Baton Rouge and Boulder County, Colorado underwater. We learned that no community is immune. They're not immune from tragedy, and no community can withstand the impacts without working together. Our public safety professionals will continue to run into places everyone is running from. Because of the lessons learned in 9/11, we are far more coordinated than we ever were before. We work in a more unified way with other city resources, with private sector resources, and the community from a common plan to meet common objectives. The adage that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts is particularly true during emergencies, whether they're large, whether they're small, what type they are. We should always remember the tragedies of our past and those who gave their lives so others could live. We should also remember those tragedies with a mind toward working together as a whole community, improving our level of readiness with the ultimate goal that no one loses their life during a disaster. As my closing comments, I'd say today, as you look around at the history of this event, you listen to the stories, you listen to the emotions, and the actions taken by so many of those that I call heroes. I ask you to remember and honor their sacrifice. I also ask you to remember the lessons learned from this tragedy in hopes we can prevent it from ever happening again. Again, thank you for taking the time to be here and helping me honor those who went before us.
Thank you so much. Now we want to move to our panel discussion portion of the presentation and remembrance tonight. And we have quite a panel, incredible group. In fact, I'm so excited to introduce to you all of them. So guys, let me have you, and gal, let me have you guys come up here to the stage. And as they make their way up here, you know, these folks could tell stories and you could sit and listen to them for hours. So maybe you might want to buy them a beer afterwards. So that's up to you. I'll let you decide that. But again, it is truly my honor to welcome these folks. And I'll give you some of their background, and then we're going to ask them some questions. Guys? Lieutenant William Hennessy. Thank you for being with us here today. Retired FDNY lieutenant. He comes from a firefighting family. Joined FDNY in 1998, rising to lieutenant, assigned to the 4th Battalion. Bill worked tirelessly to recover his brother firefighters and sister firefighters for several months at Ground Zero. It's hard not to get emotional, and I think many of you are right there with me. Received the 9/11 Rescuer Medal, commendation from the New York City District Attorney's offices, and Unit Citation Medal. His 9/11 injuries forced an early retirement. Bill is now a local teacher at North Canyon High School. And he told me being a high school teacher is harder than being a firefighter, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Please help me welcome Lieutenant Hennessy.
Thank you.
And then,
Thank you.
yeah, to Lieutenant Hennessy's right is retired Scottsdale Police Lieutenant Todd Larson. Worked for over 22 years in law enforcement. He was assigned to the DEA task force in 2001 in New York City for a conference when the attacks happened. You were there with a Phoenix police officer as well. And I know because of your work ethic, because of your skill set, because of your heart for people, you two went down to ground zero and you volunteered for days. Please help me welcome to the stage Lieutenant Todd Larson. To my far left, Peoria Fire Captain Maureen Shannon. Served her community for more than 30 years as an emergency services provider. Her role as an EMT, flight paramedic, firefighter, and urban search and rescue canine search specialist, along with her canine partner Everest, may he rest in peace, led her to greater service on September 11th. Captain Shannon and Everest spent 10 days deployed with the Arizona Task Force 1's urban search and rescue team assigned to the World Trade Center. Please welcome Captain Shannon and Molly. And you know who this guy is. Hi, Gonzo. In 2001, the World Series, the big moment, number 20 came to the plate in the bottom of the 9th inning. I almost don't want to tell the story because I love it when you tell it. The score was tied 2-2, bases loaded, and of course the feared Mariano Rivera, one of the game's most feared closers. Gonzales swung at Rivera's pitch and of course won the pennant for Arizona. But it was so much bigger than the World Series. Gonzo and his teammates and the Yankees got America back to who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Luis Gonzales. Lieutenant Hennessy, I'd like to start with you, and I don't even know where to start. You were not working on that day, that fateful day, but the second you learned, you rushed in.
Yes, so thankfully I just happened to be off duty. I lived at home at the time, and I had a little apartment in the basement of my parents' house, and I woke up to the sound of my father screaming, "Turn on the television, a plane had just hit the World Trade Center." And I turned on the TV and started getting dressed, and the phone rang, and it was my best friend, and he just had his first baby. My goddaughter was born on Saturday night, September 8th, and he had worked in that tower for 10 years, and it was on fire, and he was on the phone, and I thought he should get out of there, and it was the day he was taking his daughter home from the hospital, so I was thrilled that my friend wasn't in that building, brand new father, and so I just started getting ready, and I threw all my clothes on, and my mother was fighting with me not to leave, and my dad was a retired firefighter, knew I had to go, and kind of just started making my way into Manhattan, and I only live about 5 miles away from Lower Manhattan, and rushed into my firehouse, and the trucks had already gone, and we commandeered a bus, a New York City bus, gathered all our supplies, and we actually took a bus to the west side, towards the West Side Highway, to go down there, and we stopped at another firehouse, Engine 40 and Ladder 35, and by then that first tower had come down already, and we were just about to leave the firehouse. We all signed in the Daily Journal, and the second tower came down right before we left, and it was heart-wrenching. It was bad enough when the first tower came down and the second tower, and nobody was able to even look at each other, and we were about to start to head down there, and a priest had come running out of the church next door to the firehouse, and he jumped on the bus with us, and you know, we're heading down there, and we're praying, some guys are getting sick in the back of the bus, and the priest is leading this group prayer, and then gives us what sounded like an abbreviated version of last rites. And I kept thinking about my mom telling me not to leave, and I was just so scared. And I was looking around, and there were some really seasoned firefighters on the bus with us, guys with 30 years on, and Vietnam veterans, and guys with like tattoos and mustache, like real. I was a kid at the time, I was in my young 20s, and I was just so scared. And then we had gotten off the bus, and that smoke cloud had covered, and when everything settled, we started hearing reports of people trapped in the building. And I ran into a couple of guys I used to work with, and they were covered in the soot and dust, and they had mentioned, isn't Engine 39 in your firehouse with you guys? And I said, yeah, and we were all just trying to get our bearings, and they said they're giving a Mayday. They've been giving a Mayday for 15 minutes. And so one of the deputy chiefs assumed responsibility of the whole action, and he started talking to them over the radio. And it turns out there are 4 members from Engine 39, 2 or 3 members from Ladder 6, the lieutenant from 16 Engine, Mickey Cross, and a lady, a civilian. Her name was Josephine Harris, and the New York media dubbed her the angel in the stairway. She had, they had been coming down in the stairway, and the guys from Engine 39 were missing a guy, and they had gone back up into the stairway, and that was the moment the second tower came down, and they just happened to be in this pocket that when the building came down, it just at the last second must have fallen out to the left or to the right, and these 8 or 9 people were stuck there. So a bunch of guys from Ladder 43, and I know like all the special operations firefighters, they all climbed up all these steel beams, and they were able, after maybe a half hour or so, locate where they were, and they were able to pull all of these people out one by one. And I'll never forget seeing those guys come out, and I'll never forget the Lieutenant Jim McGlynn at the time. He's a chief now, but I just looked at him, and he had about 2 pounds of dust caked into his face and into his eyes, and he just started tearing. And these tears made these little tributaries of like a little river in it. And it was just so, out of all the tragedy that happened and of all the members we lost, it was just so unbelievable that we were able to see these guys. And so one of the takeaways with 9/11, you guys all have been mentioning unity tonight and all of that. And our country was unified. And the police and fire departments from all over the United States came and helped us. The steel workers and the iron workers and the welders and the Salvation Army and the Red Cross. And so we almost felt alone, and then the country showed up for us. And they paid their own money to get there. They spent a year down there trying to help everybody, and they were able to just ease the pain of that day that still 15 years later is there.
It's interesting because everybody wanted to try and help, and so many of us as Americans felt helpless. People donated blood, they gave money where they could. If you could share one story real quickly, just a little bit of levity here, a story about Elizabeth Taylor.
Sure. So we didn't go home for a few days. Like, we were down there, and I think it was the end of the second night. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had they took us out to the restricted zone, and that was amazing to see everybody in New York. I for some reason, I in my mind, I had just assumed Manhattan had been vacated, and to get out to this restricted zone and see thousands of New Yorkers with American flags and candles and singing and playing guitar. And so Christopher Street and the West Side Highway was where we were dropped off, and there were so many people, and they were handing us food and water, and out of the dark of the night, this older lady with a mink coat and some diamonds comes up to me, and she says, "You look so young, can I give you a hug?" And I looked at her and I said, you can, but you're going to get dirty. You know, she's like very glamorous. And I'm like, who is this crazy person? You know, like. And so as she's hugging me, one of the senior guys is standing behind her and looking at me, and he whispers into my ear, "That's the prettiest lady in America." And she wasn't my generation, so I didn't really recognize her. But from what I heard, Michael Jackson, Marlon Brando, and Elizabeth Taylor were supposed to be on a flight later that evening. Oh. And she had taken it upon herself to come down and say thank you. And everyone did that. And, you know, Steve Buscemi was an actor, and he used to be a fireman in Engine 55. But it's not even so much the celebrities. All the sports athletes were down there, and thank you guys so much. But it was like the everyday hardworking, you know, those iron workers and steel workers. They were able to move some of that steel so we could try to find some of our people.
Lieutenant Hennessy, thank you so much. Really
Sure,
appreciate you
you
sharing some of your stories with us. Lieutenant Larson, you and I were talking, and I've known you for a very long time. You went to the police academy with my husband. You were telling me a story about the hotel that you had booked for this conference. Would you share that with everybody?
Sure. A little bit of a strange twist of events is I was attending a conference in New York City for money laundering, of which primarily the attendees were banking officials, many of which worked in the World Trade Center or on Wall Street, many of which who were only alive because they were in that conference that morning, and many of which also had family members or spouses who perished that morning. And originally we were to be staying at the World Trade Center Marriott, and shortly before the trip, we changed to the Marriott Marquis in Times Square to be closer to the conference. So originally I was to be staying in the World Trade Center Marriott.
Wow, what a twist of fate. When you heard the news, I know that you and that Phoenix police officer did not hesitate, knowing your skill set, to head down to Ground Zero. You spent a little bit of time at the morgue helping families, but then you spent most of your time at Ground Zero itself. And can you share a little bit about your experience there?
Sure, yeah. The majority of the time initially trying to find our other two police officers and locate them, they were staying in the World Trade Center Marriott, and they ended up getting out and being okay. The first line of duty that I reported to the Midtown South precinct, and eventually taken to the Jacob Javits Center, and then we were bussed down on a bus and a group of us. So at the Pile, I worked primarily at the World Financial Plaza, which is directly across the street from the Pile and the two towers, where we spent time unloading trucks, labor, equipment, all of the gear. A lot of people point to the first responders, and first responders did amazing things and paid the ultimate sacrifice. But I'd like to reiterate what, from the fire side, much of the equipment we were unloading and the labor we were doing at the Pile was to support the iron workers and the construction workers that were working tirelessly, leaving their job sites from all around the area to come and cut steel, to move items with construction equipment so that the rescue attempts could continue. So a lot of my work was trying to facilitate moving of equipment so that these amazing citizens of our country could continue to use their skills and their labor to support fire and police and doing everything that they could do to save lives.
Finally, after being down there for some time, you and that Phoenix police officer realized you weren't going to fly home anytime soon. So you rented a car and you drove home all the way back here to Arizona. And you told me that you were just blown away by the sights that you saw across our country.
Yeah, that's correct. On Friday night, we got a phone call from a car rental place in Newark, New Jersey, that the Phoenix officer I was with, Art Wadowski, had been in contact with. And they said, "We have a car for you if you can come over right now." So we had to figure out how to get to Newark. And we ultimately made it over there late in the evening. It was 8, 9 o'clock at night. and got our car. But to his point, leaving, there were citizens of New York lined up on the streets, and they were clapping, they were waving flags, they were, I mean, you're trying to walk out and you were being hugged, mobbed. It was, the support was unbelievable by the citizens. And so ultimately we got a car and we drove home. And interestingly enough, we drove straight through the night, all day the next day, and we stopped at Oklahoma City. And we all know what happened in Oklahoma City, and we actually went to that memorial in Oklahoma City on the way home. There were people waving flags. There were areas across the country where, one area in particular in Indiana, there was a gentleman who had his truck backed up to the freeway, and he was standing there with a really large flag in the bed of his pickup truck, and he was just waving it as people were driving on the interstate. And I remember listening to the local radio show that we were listening to, and there were people calling in about this gentleman who had been a military veteran, and they said that's who he was. And to see this outpouring of a guy in the middle of a wheat field in Indiana standing there waving the American flag as cars are driving by made you realize that we are the greatest nation on earth, and that this country at that time was all together.
Amen to that. Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Larson. Captain Shannon, you were deployed to Ground Zero with the Arizona Task Force 1, which is a FEMA urban search and rescue team, and you were there with your dog, Everest. And you and I were talking backstage about some of your experiences and when you first got there, what it was like. Can you describe some of that?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be with this VIP panel today. I was training with the task force for about 3 years as a K-9 specialist when I got the call on 9/11 that we were getting deployed. Started packing my bags about 10:30, and I got to Phoenix Ops about 1, and they said we were getting deployed. Because of the air restrictions, we did not get to New York until the 15th. As soon as we got there, we went to work. I was on the night shift, 8 p.m. till 8 in the morning, and we split the dog team, so 2 dog teams at night and 2 in the morning. So as soon as we got to Ground Zero, we got our base of operations, Vesey Street and Church Street, we got to work.
You talked to me a little bit too about how your dog Everest played not just a search and rescue role, but a therapy role as well.
Correct. It was difficult. I mean, the way to describe every sense, what you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste, was very heavy. When you got on the pile, there's vast amounts of voids. The dogs were asked to clear those voids. So if they could smell human scent, live human scent in the hole, they stay there and bark. Well, that wasn't happening. But what happened was we jumped from void to void, and a vast area was covered, so we could move on, and then crews would come back and do more detailed work in the voids. So the dog ended up being more of a therapy dog. We walked around on our breaks and at lunch, and what we did, me and my partners, we were trying to go up to the New York City firefighters and offer our condolences. And before we could get the words out, they were like asking about the dog. How old? How do we train them? What's her name? And then they would start to tell us about their dogs that were at home, and we just listened. So that's a big part of what they played.
And you know, for those of us who are dog owners, we know that our animals are so intuitive. And you were telling me that Everest could sense that things were not good. And you had to make some compensations yourself to help Everest through it. So talk about that.
Right. After I would come off the pile, I would just go around the corner where no one could see me and decompress. And then, I felt it would be disrespectful to play with the dog on the pile to keep her motivated. So I'd go around the corner and play with her, build her back up, get motivated to go back to work.
Mm-hmm. So she could sense the things, and she was almost like looking to you like, why are we not playing when I found something?
Right. I mean, all the hours we spend training on the rubble pile, and we hide victims, and they find them, and they bark, and they get rewarded. She wasn't getting rewarded, so she was just looking at me like, all the dogs were doing that.
Yeah. And so that's when you would bring her around the corner, and that's when you would give her her reward.
Correct, yes.
How did that time change you?
Well, that's why I had my dog here, Molly. I found out that what families want are closure. And so I bought and helped train a human remains detection dog. So all these disasters we're having, Katrina, Rita, Japan, it's recovery. We're trying to find human remains to give closure to the families. So that's what motivated me.
On that note, Captain Shannon, can you tell us about Joe Shea? Yes, of course. Lots of talking, sorry. Should mention while you're getting a drink of water that you spent 10 days there at Ground Zero.
Yes, 10 days. That's the average deployment for self-sufficient for a FEMA deployment team.
Mm-hmm. And Joe Shea,
So
somebody
I
kind of
worked
near
the
and dear
night-
to your heart after what happened there.
Correct. I worked the night shift, so I didn't really interact with any family members. And so one night I was walking Everest, and there was a flicker of light under a night light, and I walked over to it, and she was sniffing there. She was very intent, and it was a piece of glass about the size of my fist, very thick, and next to the glass was a business card, and it was a Cantor Fitzgerald business card, and I heard on the news that was a big deal. So I put it in my pocket, didn't think much about it, came back home, was visiting with my family, and I had 3 items that I brought back, the glass, the card, and a firefighter from New York gave me some dog booties were in the shape of fire boots. And my brother-in-law, who's a computer guru, took the card and went to the computer and looked up the name on the card, which was Joe Shea. And he was a high administrator with Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor, and he was missing. We followed the story. He had a memorial service 2 days later, and I decided I was going to mail the card to his wife, his widow, and with a letter saying we were looking for not only for all the 3,000 lost souls, but for Joe Shea in particular. And she wrote back that meant a lot to her. She would treasure it because it was the only thing that they had from Joe from the World Trade Center.
And what did that mean to give a family like that closure?
It was an honor, and it felt good, and helped give closure to the family.
Thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. Before I get to Gonzo, Lieutenant Hennessy, are you Mets or Yankees?
I'm a Yankee fan.
Oh, sorry.
Go Yankees.
He already told me that.
Oh, did he already tell you? Okay, good. Well, I guess there are other Yankees fans. I'm a D-backs fan.
Can I add 27-time World Series champion New York Yankees?
Oh boy, here comes the smack talk. Well, I remember one World Series moment in particular, and it is etched in my mind. And if it is for me, I can only imagine how it is for you. And I know you've told the story a million times, but what an amazing moment in Game 7. How did it feel to be the hero?
I was scared. I was, all the different emotions that played throughout that whole World Series. Game 1 and 2. We won at home. Game 3, 4, and 5 in New York City, where the tragedy was there, and our team, we had played well here for the first 2 games, and then we decided that we wanted to, we're playing the biggest games of our lives, but we know that there's more important things that were going on in the world, and we decided to go down to as a group to the World Trade Center. Of course, there were some players that, were devastated, didn't want to be a part of that, which we understood that. So we went down to the World Trade Center, and I don't think anybody, aside from what they do for a living and the firefighters that are here and police officers, for us as everyday citizens, we don't really comprehend, what it's like to run back into fire or to sacrifice your life. We're always running the other way.
Right.
And to see that, it was heart-wrenching, and it's still disturbing to me to be a part of that. But we just wanted to go down there and pay tribute and just tell them thank you for what they're doing. one thing we did find out, we knew New York fans are tough sports fans, but they're a tough city. And Mayor Giuliani was the president for a good while there.
Yeah. Being in a World Series is a big deal. But we had actually one of your teammates on our set just a couple of weeks ago talking about the weight of what you guys had to do for the entire country. How did you remain focused, and what was it like to embrace that kind of responsibility?
Well, it was hard because, when you're going back to New York City, we stayed at the Grand Central Station, after, seeing everything that went on at the World Trade Centers. We were scared. Sure. A lot of extra security, and we had a great team of, police officers and people that accommodated us and went with us from Arizona to be around us for security purposes. And then to go out for Game 3, and that's when everybody remembers President Bush giving the thumbs up. And then we're counting how many umpires, and usually there's 6, and there was 7 there, and one was an undercover police officer, so we knew there was not going to be an umpire standing out in the middle of the outfield. But so we realized that this was real, and he sat in a tower, protecting us, in a light tower, to be there as a sniper during these games. And there was, these guys are watching constantly what's going on, and when you get out on the field, you don't really think about everything that's going on. And for us, it was more of a healing process for everybody. Sports has a funny way of making people forget about all their problems and everything that's going on. And we only found it fitting that, Game 3, 4, and 5 went the way it did in New York. And we talked about it as a team. If we do just so happen to win in New York City, out of respect, we were going to celebrate either back here or in the locker room, and just because there was so much going on. And to see what Mayor Giuliani was doing, he was bringing families back and forth. I don't know how I don't even think he slept. He was bringing people back and forth every night, and guys on the other team were our friends, but enemies at the same time, because we're all trying to accomplish one goal, which was to win a World Series. And of course, the story would have been great for New York to do it, but I think God always has a plan, and the plan was for them to have 3 incredible games there, and for us to be able to do it back here home in Arizona and not in front of the fans in New York.
That World Series will play out in our history books for generations to come, and kids and in history classes will read about it again for generations to come. What will you tell your kids, your grandkids, about the part you played and what that meant to you? Well,
I think HBO did an incredible piece on it. I think it's called 9 Innings from Ground Zero. And I think it tells a great story of everything about how the sports brings people together, about how many people dedicated their lives to and continue to dedicate their lives into making a difference. And like they said earlier, 9/11 changed everything. The way we go about our lives, the way we travel now in airports. It's just something that, when you speak to your kids about it, you can only tell them so much. And these guys lived it. The firefighters that were here lived through that. And I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what to expect when I walked out there, and the smell, the debris. We were fortunate enough to go to a small firehouse that was right across the street, and we walked in there, and it was an old firehouse, and to see those guys it was a break for them to get away and to be around sports athletes. And for us, we just wanted to say thank you for doing what you did, because it takes a special breed to do that. You're looking at a building falling down, millions of people are watching across the country on television, and like I said, when we run away, our first responders attack. And, for everyday people like us, we just want to say thank you.
Yes, yes, we do. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Luis Gonzales, Todd Larson, William Hennessy, Maureen Shannon, to all of you, I say thank you for the role that you played in helping us recover from this tragedy and helping us to move on. And if you would please show your support and your appreciation for these folks who have done amazing things. Yes, they deserve a standing ovation. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to share with all of you a video from 911day.org. Each year, we are called to remember how we felt as a nation on September 11th. Out of the devastation, we were inspired to do something. What is your I will commitment this 9/11 day?
I remember a real sense of community.
People just were taking care of each other.
Everybody was pitching in.
It was an extraordinary moment of connectedness.
I remember the ashes coming down from the sky, just like snow.
People were calling me and telling me to turn on the television.
I remember being in boot camp, not knowing what was going to happen.
I remember people reaching out.
Sharing food, sharing thoughts, sharing their time, their talents.
It wasn't just a New York thing. It was our family that's kind of been hurt.
We just all banded together.
It didn't matter who you are or what you came from.
You just wanted to do something.
That's what I remember.
On this September 11th,
I will remember by giving blood at a blood bank.
I will raise awareness for our disabled veterans.
I will go to a policeman or a fireman and say thank you.
I will be a better neighbor.
I will volunteer at the rec center.
I will volunteer at my church.
I will help somebody build a house.
I will find a way to help someone become more literate.
Help children with autism.
Donate clothes.
Kiss my wife.
Collect toys.
Plant a tree.
Send care packages to troops overseas.
I will.
I will.
I will.
I will always remember.
If we share our love and our time, we can make a difference.
What will you do this September 11th?
Yeah. Many have suggested that today should be transformed into a day of service. In your bulletins, you're going to find these cards, and they say, I will. And on the back, there's a place there that you can write what you will commit to. Keep it for yourself, turn it in, whatever you like. But hopefully, 9/11 will become something positive that we as Americans look to instead of the tragedy that came from 9/11. I'd like to bring back Chief Shannon.
If Martin Hussey would just come down here real quickly. We'd like to present Gina, and the Chief will present Martin with a small token of appreciation for your presiding over this ceremony. I think it's been outstanding.
Martin represents so many people that have helped out making this a reality. I just want to thank him personally on behalf of the police and fire and the city of Scottsdale. Martin, thank you very much.
Well, as we wrap things up, we want to close tonight with our candlelight ceremony. So please light your candles now. We're going to lower the house lights, and we'd like to welcome the Luke Air Force Base Honor Guard to begin our final ceremonies. Thank you so much for being here tonight, for showing your support and pledging that we will never forget. Thank you.
For more than 200 years, the American flag has been the symbol of our nation's unity, as well as a source of pride and inspiration for millions of citizens. Born on June 14, 1777, the Second Continental Congress determined the flag of the United States be 13 stripes, alternating between 7 red and 6 white, and that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation. Between 1777 and 1960, the shape and design of the flag evolved into the flag presented before you today. The 13 horizontal stripes represent the original 13 colonies, while the stars represent the 50 states of the Union. The colors of the flag are symbolic as well. Red symbolizes hardiness and valor, white signifies purity and innocence, and blue represents vigilance, perseverance, and justice. Traditionally a symbol of liberty, the American flag has carried the message of freedom and inspired Americans, both at home and abroad. In 1814, Francis Scott Key was so moved at the seeing of the Stars and Stripes waving after the British shelling at Baltimore's Fort McHenry, that he wrote the words to the Star-Spangled Banner. In 1892, the flag inspired Francis Bellamy to write the Pledge of Allegiance, our most famous flag salute and patriotic oath. In July 1969, the American flag was flown in space when Neil Armstrong planted it on the surface of the moon. Today, our flag flies on constellations of Air Force satellites that circle our globe and on the fin flash of our aircraft in harm's way in every corner of the world. Indeed, it flies in the heart of every airman who serves our great nation. The sun never sets on the U.S. Air Force, nor the flag we so proudly cherish. Since 1776, no generation of Americans has been spared the responsibility of defending freedom. Today's airmen remain committed to preserving the freedom that others won for us for generations to come. By displaying the flag and giving it a distinctive fold, we show the respect to the flag and express our gratitude to those individuals who fought and continue to fight for freedom at home and abroad. Since the dawn of the 20th century, airmen have proudly flown the flag in every major conflict on lands and skies around the world. It is their responsibility, our responsibility, to continue to protect and preserve the rights, privileges, and freedoms that we, as Americans, enjoy today. The United States flag represents who we are. It stands for the freedom we all share and the pride and patriotism we feel for our country. We cherish its legacy as a beacon of hope to one and all. Long may it wave.
In remembrance of all the souls lost on September 11, 2001, for the 245 who perished on flights 11, 77, 175, and 93, for the 2,196 who died in the World Trade Center Towers 1 and 2, for the 125 souls who perished in the Pentagon, and for our first responders, the 68 lost law enforcement personnel. You'll never be forgotten. May you rest in peace.
The life of a firefighter is closely associated with the ringing of a bell. As they begin their hours of duty, it is the bell that starts it off. And so through the day and night, each alarm is sounded by a bell, which calls them to fight fires and to place their life at jeopardy for the good of their fellow man. When the fire is out and the alarm comes to an end, the bell rings 3 times. 3 times each to signal the end. And now, for 343 firefighters who completed their task on September 11th, 2001, who selflessly dedicated their lives to serving others. Their tour complete, we sound the bell.